Let me just simply say to you good morning and thank you for braving this rainy day to help us celebrate. Celebrate what, you might say? My answer is preserving affordable housing in Lexington, changing the streetscape of affordable housing in Lexington, a shot in the arm for this neighborhood, more jobs and economic development at its best. That's why we are here this morning to celebrate. I always like to say that I had a hand, okay, in the development of this complex. And I say that because it gives me some sense of personal pride that I had a hand in it. But if you listen very carefully to that statement, if you analyze it, when I say I had a hand, that indicates that there are many other hands that were involved as well. And so I do not and cannot and will not take credit alone. In fact, there are some 67 people who are involved in this. All of their names are on the poster. And
let me first just say, on behalf of Secretary Donovan, FHA Commissioner Galante, and Public Housing Assistant Secretary Sandy Enriquez, just both thanks for inviting us here today, but also congratulations on your groundbreaking efforts. And so what I want to do is just take a couple moments for people to understand how groundbreaking this is. So the Secretary had a theory a couple years ago, and sort of said, let's try this grand experiment. And for those of you who are not sort of in the weeds of the public housing program, what you have to understand is the program began in 1937, and it was a Depression-era program. And it was a very simple program. And the program was the federal government is going to give you the money to build the housing, and thereafter just charge the tenants rents, and you should be able to make the math work. So there was nothing terribly complicated about the program. But because of the way it was designed, and of course those were days before there was FHA and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and state housing finance agencies and the secondary mortgage market and equity investors and syndicators and all that. We didn't have a mature sort of housing system at the time, so housing authorities were the only producers and providers of affordable housing. The problem with the public housing program today is that it's still a Depression-era program, and it never evolved. And so across the nation, housing authorities have what's variously estimated about $25 billion in capital needs. And that's a hard number to sort of just conceptualize. Well, what is 25 billion? It's such a big number. What does it mean? It means that any particular housing project you go across the country for public housing has about 25,000 a unit in backlog needs. 25,000 where the board, the executive director, the staff go home every night and say, I want to do better for my community, but they hit their heads against the wall because there's no money to do it. That the amount of money that they get is so minimal compared to that backlog needs. So what the secretary's thought was, rather than try to fix or reform the public housing program, why don't we allow housing authorities to leave this program and go become like owners and operators of affordable housing like those that have been developed over the past 20 or 30 years, and particularly under the Section 8 program. That we have sort of this mature program that started in the 70s called Section 8 that allows owners and operators to go out and access private capital, private equity, private debt. And as remarkable as it seems, sort of standing in front of you today, that housing authorities, for the most part, have not been allowed to sort of participate in those sort of basic sort of structures that anyone else who owns and operates real estate has. And so the deal was that we sort of went to the Congress and said, tell you what, give us 60,000 units around the country to start with, and let the housing authorities, with no additional money, let them take what they're getting today and let them move over to the Section 8 platform and let them try to sort of own and preserve this housing as other owners and operators of affordable housing. And Lexington is one of our early adopters. It was one of the first who came in and said, we'll try that out. We want to do something here in this community to preserve this housing here, and let's take a shot at it. Now, since then, we've awarded all 60,000 units around the country under this sort of initial program, and there's another 120,000 of units that are sitting on a waiting list dying to participate. So in our view, this has been a wonderful success, which is to say, if we can free housing authorities of sort of the structures that are associated with the public housing program that don't allow them essentially to go out and put a mortgage on their property, and instead let them operate like other owners of affordable housing, then there's a lot that they can do. And so indeed here in Lexington, that's what we have today, and that's why we're here, this sort of celebration of both the leadership and vision of the Housing Authority and its board of sort of taking a step forward and sort of taking the risk, but then sort of what this means for sort of public housing nationwide. For those who may not know, but we've asked the Congress now, well, they initially gave us 60,000 units to sort of lift the cap and eliminate it altogether so that other housing authorities can just sort of, anyone who sort of wants to participate in this program, they can. This is, I remember those, the training program we did in I think it was Franklin, Tennessee, that Austin and his staff showed up at, and we were sitting around a little table, and this was back when so it was just still in the idea stage of how might this work for Pimlico. And indeed, it gives me goosebumps today to think about sort of this project sort of really coming to fruition. So again, for the community, just to understand how much you're sort of groundbreaking in terms of what's happening here for this property, what it means for the future of another 1.1 million units around the country, but then the steadfastness of Austin and the board here of struggling. This was a new program. There's lots of stuff that we certainly hadn't figured it out, and for you guys sort of to stay the course and to pull it off. And so with that, again, thank you and congrats for what you've done here.
Some of you know out on Richmond Road, the east side, the Pennington Place, off Codell Drive, decaying, dilapidated. And what did that lead to? It has led to a decay in neighborhoods. And that is an example of a private sector led initiative, that and the Sonnet Cove, a similar model. And both together, more than 600 units restored and contributing. And what is it at the heart of that is contributing then to a preservation, a restoration in many respects of neighborhood. And that, when we think of America, you know, we think of neighborhood. We think of how neighbors and families working together contribute beyond, within, and then beyond their neighborhood. So that, for me, has been a big inspiration. When Greg was talking about the pent-up demand and that backlog, that $25 billion, it sort of gave me a little bit of a barometer. More than 25 years ago, I was on a job site when we were building the Toyota plant, and at that time, that investment represented almost $1 billion. So what you're describing is across America, 25 times the investment in plant and equipment of Toyota's leading #1 manufacturing plant in America, which illustrates to us the significance of the challenge. And that why then coming together in this way has been a big inspiration for all of us. Now, what Austin said he wanted me to, and I'm wrapping up, but I want to wrap this up with an illustration of how a caring and giving community in a city like Lexington works not just to respond, but to proactively engage a challenge with the vigorous support and encouragement of a city council, with a vigorous support and encouragement of a faith community in our city, with the strength of a financial statement of a city that's working to solve its problems, we have been able to assign this year $3 million to affordable housing in our city. And that and as Austin knows, that is a step in the right direction for a city. That is a beginning step. What we all know is that we don't want to invent something that's already been created. And we want to take the lessons that we learned from what the Lexington Housing Authority, from what others have done, and we want to translate that into best practices, those best practices right here in Lexington. So thank you all for being here with us today. Austin, thank you. And your organization, I saw lots of employees out there. Let's give them a hand for all they do. Thank you, sir.
On the count of 5 that you all pull.
Count of 5.
1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
There we go.
All right.
All the umbrellas went down.
This means a fresh new beginning. Center Parkway is sort of the anchor in the middle of the district, and to revitalize 206 units here is going to be a tremendous impact of positive change for this community. It's going to take, I think, about 2 years for total construction to be completed. They're going to have a variation of units from exterior facade to inside painting and cabinetry and flooring, so it's going to be a real asset so that everything doesn't look mundane and the same. It's going to be a real variety, so it's going to be really good for the neighborhood. And I'll say one of the things that's really unique about this program, as we talk about, as the mayor said earlier today, the $3 million that the council and the mayor put towards affordable housing and the $500,000 that we put towards homelessness. I think that Austin has proven that there are ways to put together really innovative financing packages to do a lot more and leverage a lot more dollars. And I think that the city needs to really look closely at the model that Austin put together here and take that $3 million that we're investing into affordable housing and look at how we can partner with other people like Kentucky Housing Authority and some of the local banks, and even do some private partnerships, private-public partnerships, so that we can leverage those dollars and make them grow.
What this is all about is fixing problems. When I think of a project like this, I think of problem solving. When I think of the pent-up demand, the backlog, that's what we were hearing from the partners all across the city and the state and even beyond the borders who have worked together to pull this project together, is that there's a big pent-up and backlog demand for affordable housing, for workforce housing in our city, and it's the same across America. So what this represents, though, that's really important for our city is it represents our seizing the moment, seizing the opportunity, taking the skill sets that we've got through our housing authority and then working with state and federal resources to put together this project. At a particular time when it's really needed, right here in Lexington.